Hello everybody and welcome back to another edition of Blazing Bishop Breakdowns. I am the host, the Blazing Bishop, aka Liam Murphy. Today we're going to be looking at a game that the Blazing Bishop himself played way back in 2017 at the Manhattan Open. That year I had just moved to New York City. I was a new chess coach and my rating at the time was about 1,300. So I was playing in the Manhattan Open in the under 1,400 section. I said, you know what? I got to level up my chess if I'm going to be teaching it. So let me play in some tournaments. This was a 5-round tournament, and the first 4 rounds I won. So I was 4-0 going into the last round. I was playing my opponent who was also 4-0. And the winner of this game was going to get first in the section and take home $1,000. So I am playing with the white pieces, and let's jump into the game. So I opened up with e4. Nowadays I play c4, but back then I just played a little bit of everything. And my opponent played e6, the French defense. Here I played d4, a very classical response, saying, you know what, I'm going to take the center if you're going to give it to me. Allow both my bishops to see the chessboard as well. My opponent played d5. Very normal in the French defense, striking at the center. And here I captured. Now, a way that a lot of people play the French defense is they will push their pawn to e5. And the reason is the light squared bishop for black is considered their worst minor piece. And that is because pawns are on the light colored squares. So this bishop is trapped in by its own pawns, not seeing squares on my side of the board. So I didn't play that though. I played the exchange French where I capture the pawn in the center. A fine way to play. My opponent captured back, and I developed my knight to f3, just controlling the center, developing a piece. And my opponent played bishop d6, moving a bishop before a knight. A usual general rule of thumb is that you will move your knights before your bishops, and that's because the bishops are more flexible pieces. They go to different squares, and they like to get information about what your opponent's doing before you decide what squares to place them on. The knights, however, they really only have 1 or 2 happy squares at the start of the game. So you almost always know that they're going to be fine moving to c3 or f3 if you're white, or c6 or f6 if you're black. I developed my knight to c3, following that rule, getting both my knights out before my bishops, and striking at this undefended d5 pawn. My opponent played knight e7, developing a piece and defending the pawn. A little bit unusual not to place the knight on f6, but in the French this sometimes happens. And I played bishop d3, a fantastic bishop, seeing squares on both sides, on the king side and queen side of my opponent. And now I'm able to castle next turn if I would like to. Here my opponent played c5, striking at the center. And perhaps they wanted to get their knight on c6, but they first wanted to move their c-pawn. And here I broke, another soft rule in the opening. And that's because I moved a piece more than once at the start of the game. So I played knight b5. Now, so usually you want to, before you consider moving a piece more than once at the start, you want to develop all of your pieces and get your king castled. But I had a reason for playing knight b5, and that is because this bishop is trapped. If you stay on this square, if you go to c7, my knight will take you. e5 I control. You can't go to f4 because of my bishop. These squares are attacked by pawns or my pieces. So I knew I was going to be able to trade my knight for this bishop. And, both pieces are worth 3 points in our head. But they say that if you can, you usually want to trade the knight for a bishop at the start of a game. Because bishops are better pieces when the position is open. And it's easier to open up a position than to close it. So my opponent played queen a5 here. Not a good move. One, remember, you don't want to move your queen at the start of the game. Notice that they're not developing their pieces if they do this. And I remember when I asked my opponent, why did you play queen a5? They told me they just didn't see my bishop defending my knight. They thought they were going to be able to fork my knight and my king. Even if my bishop was not defending my knight, though, my knight would be able to retreat to c3. So you would not win this knight. And so this move is just doesn't do anything for black. It's a waste of a turn. I played c3, which is a fine move, but there's actually a super strong move for white here. So if you need to, pause your video and try to find what is the best move for white to play here. If you said b4, wow, give yourself a pat on the back. You are a super strong chess player. And let's look at why this move is so strong. You may be thinking, what? b4? That's just a free pawn. So let's look at that. If the queen takes the pawn with the check, white has a couple strong moves here, but let's just look at one of them, which would be bishop d2. The bishop is now taking these squares. Again, you can't take the knight. So if the queen goes to a4, hello, you stop defending your dark squared bishop. Remember, the queen was doing a job back on d8 that was keeping the bishop safe. And when the queen came over to a5 for the check, she stopped defending this bishop. So white would take this bishop with check. The king would move. And you might even trap the queen with moves like bishop b5, getting this rook involved. You don't know. But black would be in a world of trouble here. So I did not play b4. I played c3 and the game continued. My opponent played queen b6. So they're wasting tempo or turns. They moved their queen once and then they had to move it again to now defend this bishop. And remember, if you're moving pieces more than once, you're not getting your other pieces out or getting castled. So I took the bishop now, trading my knight for the bishop, and the queen took back. And here I found a way that I could develop my dark squared bishop with tempo, meaning with time. So again, pause your video if you need to. Find out how we can capture or develop this dark squared bishop with tempo. So what I did in the game is I first captured on c5. I said, you know what, the queen's going to capture back. Otherwise, it's just a free pawn. The queen captured back. And then I played bishop e3, developing my bishop with tempo. And this shows why you usually don't want to bring your queen out at the start of the game, because your opponent can develop their minor pieces and harass your queen, giving me free turns. So I move this bishop. The queen's going to have to move. And then I'm going to get another turn to move another one of my pieces, where black is now just moving their queen once, twice, 3, 4 times already, and it's about to be the 5th turn they have to move their queen, and we're only 11 moves into this game. So, nearly half the moves have been queen moves for black. Not how you want to start. My opponent played queen d6 here, getting the queen out of danger, and here I played queen c2. The reason is because I noticed that this king is in the center of the board. Black has not done a good job of prioritizing getting their pieces developed, and they've not done a good job of getting castled. So queen c2 prevents black from castling, because if black were to castle, I would be able to take the h7 pawn with check. The king would move, and then I would retreat my bishop, making sure it doesn't get stuck behind, like a move like g6. So black's unable to castle here. And just note real quick that if you look at the position, I have all of my minor pieces developed already, and black only has 1 developed. So white is getting a huge lead in development, which, if you're black, especially if you're wasting development, you can get blown off the board pretty quick. So my opponent plays bishop g4, finally getting one of their minor pieces into the game. And here I played knight d4 for a couple reasons. One is I wanted to centralize my knight. This knight is a great piece, hitting some key squares. Another reason is I was pretty sure I want to castle on the king side of the board. And if I castle on the king side of the board right now, well, then the bishop would take my knight, my pawn would take back. And now my king is actually kind of weak, because this g file has been opened to the king, or as I would say, the door has been opened. So I didn't want to castle with them able to take my knight and weakening my king. So first I moved my knight to d4. And here my opponent played a6. Again, not prioritizing getting castled or developing their last minor piece. So they're falling really far behind. a6 was played because they want to control the b5 square, which some of my pieces may want to use. But, even if, let's just give them a move like developing their knight. If I play a move like knight b5, this is not a threat for black. Black could just retreat their queen to d7, defending their bishop, and getting out of danger. And now black can castle on, the queen side of the board, and they're doing fine. They have a great chess game here. So instead, they played a6, again, wasting the turns to getting developed, and I castled my king. And remember, castling can both be a defensive move, getting your king safe, and an attacking move, because it connects your rooks, and this rook is now free to play in the position. My opponent here played knight g6, moving a second piece a second time. And they played knight g6, I believe, because now they think they'll be able to castle, and I won't be able to take the h7 pawn. And I played bishop f5. And the reason I played this move is for a couple reasons. One, black is pretty much forced to capture this bishop. Obviously, you can't go here, here, or here with the bishop. You can't go here. And if you try to go to h5, well, your bishop's going to be trapped. I hope you guys saw this because g4 traps the bishop. You're going to lose that bishop for a pawn. So I knew black would have to capture this bishop. And what I get to do is I get to take back with my knight. And now my knight is hitting the queen, and it's threatening the g7 pawn with a check. And black does not have really, any good moves in this position. They could try a move like queen f6, saying, well, now I'm defending my pawn. But the move bishop d4 would hit the board, hitting the queen, x-ray hitting the g7 pawn. The queen would have to move, and I'm still going to get this pawn. So queen f6 doesn't work. What my opponent tried was queen f8. Oh, no. Yes, they're stopping me from taking the g7 pawn, but they're also stopping themselves from castling. So now I was rubbing my fingers together. I said, this king is stuck in the center of the board. My opponent still hasn't developed their knight over here. And note, if they don't develop this knight, this rook is not playing chess. So they're down like 2 pieces right now, in my mind. And this rook's not playing chess, so make that 3 pieces they're down. And this queen is only doing a defensive, passive job, not what you want your queen to be doing. So I just played a very, logical move here, and that is rook e1. Aligning my rook up with the king. And again, pause your videos here. If white got to move a second turn in a row, so if I got to play rook e1 and then another move, what move would you play as white? So my plan here was if I got a move, let's just get black a nothing move like h6. The move I would play would be bishop c5, checking the king and discovering attack on the queen. Black can't block with the queen because I control that square 3 times. So they would have to move their king, and then I would pick up the queen, trading a bishop for the queen and beating up substantial material. My opponent did see this x-ray attack, and what they tried is knight e5, saying, well, now your rook will see my knight and not the king. However, this move does not save black by any means. What I played here was f4, saying, you got to go, knight. If you're not going to move, I'm going to take you with a simple pawn, putting pressure on the pin piece, kind of. And my opponent played g6. So they're saying here, if you take my knight, I'm going to take your knight, and we're going to trade knights. What I played here after thinking for quite a while, because these were slow chess games. I believe there was 90 minutes. And then there was once you reach the time control, you got another 30 minutes. So these were very long games. I played bishop b6 here. And my plan was, if you take my knight here, I'm going to take with the queen. And I just thought I'd be able to get a mating attack on the king here with all of these squares being attacked by this king. What my opponent did is they did not take my knight. They played f6, saying, I'm going to defend my knight. And here I took a pause. I said, you know what? You're winning this game. You can just make a simple move here, and you're going to win the tournament and take home $1,000. And so what I did, not the best move in the position by any means, but I retreated my knight. And the reason is that this knight is pinned to the king. There's nothing black can do about that. I'm going to be able to trade a 1-point piece for a 3-point piece, and that's enough for me to win the game. So that's why I retreated my knight here. And my opponent played queen d6. Now, don't take the knight right away, guys, because if you do, you lost your bishop. So first, what I did is I retreated my bishop to f2, no checks to my king, getting my bishop to safety, and no matter what black does next turn, I'm going to be able to take that knight. So finally, on turn 22 or 21 for black, they castled their king way too late in the game. And I took the knight. That was my plan. I'm up material. I'm confident I can win this game. My opponent took back, and I played b4 here. The plan, if I got to move again, was to play bishop c5, skewering the queen to the rook. And my opponent played knight d7, stopping that plan, because if I put my bishop there, the knight would take it. And so here I played rook f1. I guess I wanted my rook on the open file here to offset the other rook. And my opponent played d4. Here I got my last piece into the game finally. Rook a d1, lining my rook up with the queen, not what the queen wants to be lined up with. And my opponent did the same to me. Rook a to c8. Here I got out of this pin with a check. So I gained a tempo with this check by playing queen b3. So now I'm no longer pinned to this rook, and I did a check, so I'm gaining a tempo, or gaining a free turn. My opponent moved the king, and I captured on d4. The reason is I want this position to open up. I'm winning this game. I got my rook lined up with the queen. I have a bishop. They do not. So I want open diagonals. I want open files in this position. My opponent got the queen out of the pin with my rook by playing queen c6, and I captured again on e5. My opponent moved their rook to e8, and I played bishop d4, setting up discoveries to this king, threatening, moves like e6, where the bishop would check the king, and this king would just be running low on squares. Here, my opponent traded rooks. Remember, guys, when you are losing in chess, do not trade pieces. This only helps your opponent. So I was very happy for this trade to happen. My rook took back, and now I have full control of the open F file, which is right by the king. So I felt great about that. My opponent played knight takes e5, and here I first took the knight, the rook took back, and then I said, aha, I see a checkmate. So that's why I took that knight. Checkmate in 3. So again, pause your videos if you need a little bit of time, but white has checkmate in 3 moves. The first move I did was queen f7 check. The slowest way for black to be checkmated is to play king h6. And then I played queen f8 check. The king's only move was king g5. And then checkmate in 1 move was queen f4, where the queen hits diagonal, the file, the ranks, and then the knight takes away the h5 square, leading to checkmate. So that was awesome. I won the tournament. I won the $1,000. But there actually was a quicker checkmate that I missed, and that is because, remember guys, pinned pieces don't protect. So I didn't even need to capture this knight. I first could have just gone right for queen f7. Let's show that. So queen f7, the knight cannot capture back because then you will be in check. The king's slowest way to get checkmated again would be to go to h6. Here, you reroute your bishop to e3, checking the king. The king's only move is g5, and then super cool checkmate, hitting the board, knight f5, puts the king in checkmate. The queen takes these squares, so the king cannot run. So I could have won the game a turn sooner. So I missed that, but still, I was super happy to win this tournament, not only take home the $1,000 prize money, but also, shot up the rating ladder by going 5-0 in this tournament. And let's remember why black lost this game. They did not prioritize developing their pieces. So they were moving their queen like 5 times at the start of the game. They brought their queen out early. Don't do that. And they didn't ever get developed until way too late in the game, or castled their king. And so I was able to just, attack their position through simple logical moves, controlling the center, developing my pieces, and getting my king castled. I hope you guys enjoyed looking at this video. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Really helps us out. Goodbye.